Hey, it's Jim. So this is part 2 of Vinyl Finds 8, I think. Found a copy of Highway to Hell from AC/DC. If you've tried to pick up AC/DC records from this period, you will discover how difficult it is to find a clean copy of anything from AC/DC, especially Highway to Hell and Back in Black. Sorry, getting mixed up with Amy Winehouse. Back in Black. Those two records are almost impossible to find that haven't been played to death. So it was really nice to find a really nice clean copy of this record. This is not a first pressing. I'm sure this is a later pressing, but I'm totally fine with that. It sounds great. I am happy with it. Got nothing to complain about. I know there's a lot of conversation about the Back in Black pressings and, you know, the repress versus the original and all of that, but listening to this, it sounds great. Then we have a copy of Party Store from the Dirt Bombs. This is a great record. If you're a fan of the Dirt Bombs, you know that this is a kind of hard to show this, but it's a triple LP, so it's a, you know, triple gatefold or double gatefold, I guess is what it's called. And if you're a fan of the Dirt Bombs, then you know that they really changed their style album to album. I think that was the original concept behind the record, or behind the band, was that they'd pretty much make each record distinctly different in style. And they've done a pretty good job of that over the years, moving from kind of classic garage rock to kind of soul. This is hard to describe, but it kind of sits in a category of its own when listening to it. It's sort of electronica, sort of garagey, sort of, it's just kind of a mixture of a lot of different things, but it's really groovy and great to listen to. Has a lot of almost sort of krautrock kind of drum sound to it, very, you know, repetitive rhythms. Good record. All of these were really good deals, so I couldn't pass them up. I think that Dirt Bombs record was like $6, and it's a triple LP in perfect condition. So, yeah, not going to pass that up. Found a copy of Uplift Mofo Party Plan from Red Hot Chili Peppers. This is the last record from the original lineup with Kiedis and Flea and Slovak and Irons. Great record. I think when I saw them the first time was just before this record, so it was on the previous record, Freaky Styley. And then I saw them again on this tour back in Baltimore at a club there. That was actually kind of funny. I remember walking to the show and with a buddy of mine, and we're walking across a bridge near the Charles Theater in Baltimore, and these guys are walking towards us, and it looked exactly like the sort of classic scene from like Reservoir Dogs, where you see the, you know, slow motion guys, like super cool guys, walking towards you in a line. It was the Chili Peppers, and they were looking for a place to eat lunch, and so they stopped us and talked to us for a while. But it was such a cliche of like the band walking down the road in a line. that we were just laughing by the time they got to us. But it was funny. So we gave them some good recommendations for lunch, and then saw them that night, and that was fun. Next is Prince and the Revolution, Parade. So this is the final album from Prince and the Revolution after Purple Rain and, the one in between, the psychedelic record. But this is the soundtrack to Under a Cherry Moon. And it's probably the record that I listened to least from Prince. This is the one that has, I believe, Love Sexy and maybe Kiss on it. Trying to remember. Is it Love Sexy? No, not Love Sexy. This is the one with Kiss, yeah. Another Lover Hole in Your Head. Those were the singles, if I remember right. New Position, I think, might have also been a single. But I wasn't a huge fan of this record. I want to try it again and see what I think, because it's really hard to go wrong with Prince. Madness, absolutely. From 1980. This is the second record from Madness. Don't hear a lot about Madness on the VC, which is too bad because they were a great band. I think the single from this album was Baggy Trousers. Really great, second wave ska band. Still going these days. And, I've heard a few things. It's been a while since I've listened to something from them, but I remember maybe 10 years ago I heard a newer record, and it was great. So, it's nice to see a band like that still going. This is a great record. I saw them maybe a couple years after this, 83 or so. Absolutely phenomenal live, as most really good ska bands are. They're perfect party bands. They're perfect live bands. Horn sections are amazing to have in a show, and these guys just perform like crazy. Great record.
Naughty boys in nasty schools, their masters breaking all the rules, having fun and playing pool, smashing up the woodwork tools. All the teachers in the pub, passing men a ready rub, trying not to think of when the lunchtime bell will ring again. Oh, what fun we had, but did it really turn out bad? All I learnt at school was how to bend not break the rule. Oh, what fun we had, but at the time it seemed so bad, trying different ways to make a difference too.
And then this one was kind of just a thing I came across, and I it was a couple bucks, and I remembered the band, and that's Roman Holiday. And this is 80s, kind of in the swing jive resurgence that was happening in the early 80s. There was a bunch of resurgences happening. People were kind of remaking different periods of music a lot in the early 80s. Psychedelia, there was a whole psychedelic scene in, especially coming out of LA in the early 80s. The Stray Cats were kind of bringing rockabilly back. Roman Holiday was part of people like Joe Boxers and other people who were trying to do the kind of swing and jive thing. And this had a few tracks that got some radio play. Don't Try to Stop It, Motor Mania. They were fun. Really kind of lightweight stuff, but it there you go.
Well, when they say you've lost your touch, I smile. You don't couldn't handle anything you're laying down. It's a fact you put the snapping crocodile. You send me crazy when you say you're gonna spend all day in bed. My heart went out of style. I get scared inside when you stand by.
This is a 80s collection of James Brown tracks called Doing It to Death. These are tracks from 70 to 73. There's a lot of great stuff on here. I've been trying to pick up James Brown records, which is really tough to do, actually, unless you're buying, like, a bunch of represses, new ones. But I used to have, I don't know, a dozen, 15 great James Brown records. I had a lot of great singles and EPs, and I kind of want those back rather than represses. So I'm not in a big hurry to pick them up, but I'm kind of slowly trying to find them. But I came across this, and it's nice. It's got like Escapism, Make It Funky Part 2, got A Bag of My Own. There's great, got ants in my pants and I want to dance. Great stuff. Then found a copy of Roger Waters' Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. This was great to find. I always loved this record. It was kind of from the period where I was really getting into listening to Pink Floyd, and this was high school, so this was like 84, I think, 84, 85. I had, 84. And so I had kind of discovered Pink Floyd. I mean, I grew up hearing them on the radio and, had a copy of The Wall, but, when The Wall came out, I was still pretty young, 11 or 12. And I actually had a copy of The Wall, but it was always a little too freaky for me at that age. I'd listen to it and just, it's a pretty disturbing album. And so I'd connect to certain songs and not to others. And then I think by the time I was in junior high, I started listening to, Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here. And so I was really kind of enjoying those records. And they weren't records they were records that I could enjoy with friends, because most of the music that I listened to, my friends didn't listen to. Some of it, we'd find common ground. And that was one that, I'd have friends who, everybody knew those records, and so it was easy to kind of share those experiences. And I really enjoyed this record when it came out. This is first American pressing before they put the black box across her butt. And I think this is on Sire. Oh, it might be Sire, but I think it's a custom label. So, oh yeah, no, it's not. Columbia, maybe. Columbia. Then the last couple. So I found a copy of A.V. Tair's Eucalyptus from, what is this, 2015, 2017, 2017. So Eucalyptus from A.V. Tair. A.V. Tair from Animal Collective, Gatefold, This was really inexpensive to pick up. I guess this was the limited club edition, which comes with the book. I have not heard this record yet. I haven't yet come across something from somebody in Animal Collective that I didn't like. There are definitely things that I listen to more, and things that I listen to less, but nothing that I just straight up didn't enjoy. And so for, I think that was like $8, and for that price, I'm never gonna pass up a perfectly mint copy of anything from that band. The last record that I came across was a bit of a grail for me. I've been trying to find this album for a while. They did a repress this last year for Record Store Day, but I think our store got one copy and it was gone to the guy who walked in the door first. And that's the Dream Syndicate, Days of Wine and Roses. And this just happens to be the first pressing. This is the Ruby edition. It's in perfect condition. And I was thrilled to come across this. So that was just really nice to just stumble across. Dream Syndicate was part of the Paisley Underground in the early 80s out of LA. They were fronted by a guy named Steve Wynn, and in fact, I think that they've recently got back together and produced an album a couple years ago. They made a number of albums in the 80s, but this is the only one that I really connected to. It's the only one that had Kendra Smith on it, playing bass, and she sang vocals on one of the tracks. And I realized as time went on that I liked Dream Syndicate, but I really loved the things that Kendra Smith was involved in. She left the band to team up with Dave Roback of Rain Parade, and they created Opal. Opal made really just one record, and that was called Happy Nightmare Baby. That was one of my favorite records in the 80s. And then they put together some material after the band had disintegrated or split up or turned into Mazzy Star, actually. Kendra Smith left the band at a certain point, and Hope Sandoval replaced her in Opal, and they stayed as Opal for about a year and then changed the name to Mazzy Star. But they had enough material with Kendra Smith to make another record called Early Recordings. That's a really good record too. But Happy Nightmare Baby is a phenomenal record that I still haven't been able to replace. It's really obscure. And even more obscure is Kendra Smith's solo record from the 90s, which I'm not sure was ever pressed on vinyl. Anyways, Dream Syndicate, this record, it's really a great record, but it's a record that I hadn't listened to in probably 10 years. And so I went back and was listening to it in the last few days, and it struck me how much of a debt they owe to Velvet Underground listening to it. The first three tracks on this record they might as well be, a Velvet Underground cover band. And then they don't really sort of come into their own until the fourth track on this, which is Then She Remembers. And then Halloween is a good track. And then side two for me was always the side that I always loved anyways. But it's more hit and miss than I remember, but when it hits, it's a phenomenal record. Then She Remembers is funny because it sounds like Velvet Underground meets, the Stooges, and it's a good combination. Yeah, but this is definitely a record that I had been trying to find for a long time. So I was very happy to find that. And that's it. So hope you found some of that interesting. Thank you for taking the time to watch.